my channel. Today I'm going to give you my top 5 tips for being a better photographer. Tip number 1, get out there and shoot. Sounds oversimplistic, doesn't it? But the amount of people who come to me who say they're stuck in a rut, they haven't shot for months, years even, the camera's gathering dust in their cupboard, in the back room somewhere, okay? So you've got a choice here. You can sell your camera and forget it, or you can just go out there and shoot. Because people are afraid to fail for some reason. And photography is not one of those things where you pass every test, where you clear every hurdle. The more mistakes you make, the better you get, because you learn from these mistakes, especially with digital, because you get a chance to look at what you did, analyze it, critique it, and then you can get advice from people, from YouTube, all sorts of internet media now that can help you. So there's no excuse for not going out there and shooting. You've got to build that momentum, you've got to snowball your ideas, and you will improve. So go out and shoot. Go on, do it now. Tip number 2, do not get hung up on kit. Another bugbear of mine. The amount of people who come to me and say, well, you know, I would be a better photographer, I think, but my camera's not good enough, my lens is not good enough, I don't have the right lighting. Excuses, excuses, excuses. There haven't been any bad cameras on the market for 10 years now. Even entry-level digital SLRs are great, and you can get mirrorless systems, compact systems for not a lot of money these days. You do not have to spend thousands and thousands of pounds on kit. People who assume that you get a better picture with a better camera, well, they're lying to themselves. You've got to make the best with what you've got. So no excuses, use what you've got, use it well, and you will create good imagery. Tip number 3, shoot in manual mode. And what I mean by that is manual exposure. Autofocus is fine, okay? In fact, that's probably the best invention photography's ever had. But yeah, shoot in manual exposure, because then you'll learn a little bit more about your camera, and you'll be able to squeeze a little bit of more detail and nuances from your exposures, because you will control it rather than the camera adjusting it for you. And I know you can use exposure compensation, but I've always felt that yes, you can do that, but by the time you have done that, the time taken to do that would have been the same as adjusting it in manual. I know shooting in shutter priority or aperture priority is a bit of a safety net, but really when you get to the point where you're being creative, you should know enough about your camera and the technique to be able to shoot in manual. It's not really that tricky. It's something that any intermediate to advanced photographer should be doing, and it will give you more control of your exposure, and therefore you'll have more control over the creative process ultimately, and therefore less work to do in post, which is always a good thing. So yeah, manual mode, go do it. Tip number 4, get to know your camera better. This ties in nicely with tip number 1, getting out and shooting. Essentially what I'm saying is practice. Practice, 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 because what happens is you get to know your camera's dials and buttons and knobs better. Therefore, there's less obstacles between you and creating a good image, because less brain power has been dedicated to the nuts and bolts of it, and more brain power can be dedicated to the creative process, okay? And possibly more importantly, the more you practice, the better you'll start to understand exposure. So therefore, every time you adjust the shutter speed or the aperture or the ISO, you'll see how much it affects your image. Being digital means you can look back at every picture that you take, and therefore you'll know that in certain circumstances you'll have to change your exposure by this much, either by your shutter speed, your aperture or your ISO, and therefore you'll create what you want to create, and the process will become much more quick and smooth, because you'll know that by clicking certain amounts of exposure you'll create a certain change in your image. And that becomes almost like muscle memory, which is a great advantage, because it makes your shoots smoother, it makes your shoots more efficient, and again, you can dedicate more brain power to the creativity, and that's a good thing, because being creative and creating great images is exactly what we want. The technical bits are actually the foundations of what you need to be creative, but if you can have that on the back burner working away all the time because you've practiced it so many times, the creative process becomes a lot more enjoyable and becomes actually a lot more easy because you can dedicate every conscious thought into creating that instead of having to think about what you're doing with the settings. It's definitely a good thing, so get to know your camera as well. Tip number 5. This one is definitely the most important one to me. It's about concepts and ideas. Most great photographs do not happen by chance. There's always a great concept or idea about it. And that's because photography is a form of expression. That's how I feel. You can treat it like you're just capturing a likeness of something or somebody, but I feel there's much more to it than that. And what happened to me, which springboarded my career and my work as a photographer, was when I discovered that actually, when I take a picture of something, it's my expression of what I'm looking at. I call it a way of seeing, and this applies to anybody who picks up a camera, if they take the time to start to think about and to work with that concept. Because we all have different points of view, we all have different feelings when we see something or somebody, and therefore we can hopefully express that. And by doing this, this will give you an individual way of looking at photography, and it will give you a chance to create unique images, even of the same subject. And I believe that's a very powerful thing, and the most powerful images that I've ever seen have always had great concepts behind them. And this is really important. I think if you can grasp this, this will push on your photography leaps and bounds. It's what helped me, and I've never looked back since. Right guys, thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. If you have, then please like and subscribe. And if you have any comments, queries, questions, or ideas for future video topics, please leave them in the comments section below. Hopefully, I'll see you in the next video.